Joining us is Democratic candidate for Texas Attorney General, former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski. Sir, how you doing today?
Michael, great seeing you. I feel great.
Hey, good to see you too. Glad to have you on. Let's delve right into it. You previously served as mayor of Galveston, and this is not your first time running for Attorney General. You ran in 2022, ultimately losing in the primary. Why run again for the Texas Attorney General's office, for the Democratic nomination?
Well, the need for decent and, integrity-driven leadership is greater than ever, Michael. So nobody likes to lose a primary. And as you correctly point out, I made it to a runoff in 2022 and lost to my colleague, Rochelle Garza, and I was sorry to see her lose in the November general. But I stuck with it. I became the best Democrat I could be, continuing a tradition that my father and grandfather set before me as a lawyer. And so the reason I'm running again, especially as a former mayor, Michael, is I see the various levels of government being disrespected in Austin, whether it's school superintendents or mayors of Tyler or the county judge of any number of counties in the state. They're just not being treated with the respect that the voters have given them by electing them. And so as Attorney General, I want to run from the heart of a lawyer, the heart of a public servant, and the heart of a former mayor to make it right. I think 2026 is a perfect time to run again.
We're going to delve into your time as mayor in just a little bit, but I want to go off of one thing you just said. It sounds like you feel folks across the state have been disrespected. How so?
Well, the state of Texas has become a persecutor, and they're taking their directions from a very select few of wealthy donors. And, that's not putting dollars in anybody's pocket. Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, and Ken Paxton have been around for so long, and the Republican Party that have birthed them has been in charge of the state for 30 years. And there's a lot of things that are broken. Public education is not suitably provided for. In fact, we're going the other way by defunding public education. Healthcare outcomes are poor because we don't draw down the full complement of tax dollars that we're entitled to. We send it to Washington, D.C., and when it's time for it to come back home, the Republicans in charge say, no, give it to New Jersey. And then finally, rural Texas is getting ripped off. I can't think of a better way to put it, Michael. The Democratic Party led this state for so long and did it so well. I think people are ready for change, and so the disrespect has got to end. Let Democrats share in the power here, and you will see what public service looks like again.
Say you are elected to become the state's next top lawyer. What would you say are your biggest priorities?
Well, I think number one, as lawyer, we want to return the office of Attorney General to that of a great law firm, staffed with first-class attorneys trained here in Texas. Right now, it's more of a political hit campaign. Law is kind of secondary to, sticking it to people that are vulnerable. And that is not what the law is for. Look, as a Democrat, I subscribe to the classic definition of what government is for, which is to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Bobby Kennedy said that in 1968, the night Martin Luther King was killed. And, what that really means is government should help people live a better life and then get out of the way. And so as Attorney General, you'll see me restore confidence in the lawyers that serve the state. We'll also do the fundamentals, Michael, collect child support and deliver it, all of it, on time to the conservator parent, issue legal opinions without bias, and manage the Open Records Act and the Open Meetings Act the way it was intended, which is transparency. Open up the government to the people, because it all started in Watergate, which you'll recall my family has some connection to with my grandfather, Leon Jaworski, the former Watergate special prosecutor. It's in his legacy that I operate proudly.
If I heard you correctly, it sounded like you wanted to take bias out of legal opinions. Talk to me a bit more. What do you mean by that?
Well, people use the phrase the rule of law, and what that means is we elect legislators to pass laws. We elect and sometimes appoint judges to faithfully interpret the laws, and we elect governors and other executives to faithfully execute the law. And what we see right now is people just basically winging it. They're just doing it like whatever serves Donald Trump or whatever serves their political party. And what I'd like to do is just return the notion of fairness. And that's the way I've operated for 35 years in my private practice. People know I'll call them back, I'll text them back, I'll email them back, I will correspond with them. And they also know that I'm not going to, put my interests ahead of the public. When I was mayor of Galveston, you go to Galveston and ask anybody, they'll tell you Joe was fair, he always responded to inquiries, and he opened up government so everyone could see what was going on. You can do that in the state. And, I'm going to be 64 on March 1st, right before the election, Michael. I'm a young 64, and what I am looking forward to is robustly campaigning around the state of Texas and showing people what public service looks like again.
Talk to me a bit more about your time as mayor of Galveston. What stood out to you the most from that experience? How will you apply it to the Attorney General's office?
I think it boils down to courage in office, and this is something that I want voters to key on. When I was mayor of Galveston, I was elected right after a really bad 100-year storm hurricane known as Hurricane Ike, and it devastated the island. The previous mayor, my mentor, Lyda Ann Thomas, had worked with other politicians and government officials to secure close to $1 billion for Galveston's recovery, and it was my job to make sure it was spent correctly. Part of that requirement, since all the money came from housing and urban development, was to rebuild our public housing. Now, we could have gotten away with just rebuilding apartment complexes like had been done in the Kennedy and Johnson administration, but I wanted a more progressive solution. So, Michael, I took a page out of another great Texas Democrats book, Henry Cisneros, who was HUD secretary under Bill Clinton. He's the godfather of mixed income development. So, instead of just rebuilding 569 apartment units, we thought bigger and more progressive. We went for mixed income development, so doctors and lawyers, nurses and firemen, teachers, and income-eligible public housing constituents could all live together. And what's important about that, Michael, is that there's no stigma and everybody had a fair shot at coming home from the storm.
Now, on your campaign website, it's my understanding you say as Attorney General you would require high schools to offer voter registration. How will you go about doing so?
Well, this will be my great pleasure. One of the things I'll do first week as Attorney General, if the voters with their blessing send me into office, I will send a letter to every high school principal and I will enforce, happily, Texas Election Code 13.046D as in David. And Michael, what that says is, hey, principal, every school, whether it's public or private or charter or religious or even the new voucher schools, you have to offer voter registration to the senior class twice a year. The idea being, we want you to graduate school registered to vote. Well, Michael, just in the public system alone, there's over 400,000 seniors graduating every May. If you add the private schools and you increase it for population, we're really talking 500,000 every year. Over a 4-year term, an attorney general enforcing this law could see 2 million young Texans registered to vote. It's a game changer, and I think the young Texans ought to have a voice in our elections because it's their world, and we're leaving it to them.
How much of a cost, if any, do you see that having, on the state's budget?
Oh, it'll be next to nothing. The printing of registration cards. And frankly, it's the state's obligation to make sure that the voice of the people, or as we classically referred to it, vox populi, is heard. Michael, we hear so much about voter integrity. Well, that sounds nice. I'd feel a lot better about it if more people voted. I think the real purpose of an election is to find out what is it the people want. And if only about 25% of the people are voting, and don't get carried away with, but percentages of those registered voting. Wait, how many people are even registered, much less voting? There's 25 million eligible to vote in this state. 18.5 million are registered, and we'll be lucky to see 10 million at this election here coming up in November. That ain't right. We need to register our youth and then the adults as well, and then we'll have a better sense of what the people really want.
You mentioned vouchers there in the previous answer. It's my understanding you've called school vouchers unconstitutional. Why do you feel that?
Yeah, because it's taking our public tax dollars and giving it to people to give to private schools. And, it's also part and parcel of the fact that the Texas legislature intentionally, for years, have not followed the mandate of Article 7 of the Texas Constitution, which very simply says that the legislature shall suitably provide for an efficient system of free public schools. And I don't care who you are, anyone can see that we are defunding our public schools and we're delegating the responsibility to local taxpayers who are naturally hostile because we don't have any other real taxes in the state. It's all property tax. And if you're a renter, trust me, you're indirectly paying the property tax that your landlord is paying. And so if the state wants to be serious about literally the most important function of government under our Texas Constitution, which is to provide free public education to every Texas youth, it's the gift that keeps on giving, then they need to pay for it. And God knows we've got the resources to do it in this oil-rich state.
It's my understanding that during the last legislative session, there was over over $8 billion allocated to public schools. And some would say, school vouchers are not taking money away from public schools. What would be your response to that?
Well, we are a huge state. We are a growing state. And $8 billion sounds like a lot of money. It's still not enough. And the local institutions I trust, the legislature may have done this one-time bump, but it's nothing that they're going to sustain. And what I would say is we need to just be honest about it, that public schools are literally more than just education. It's like a cultural hub for life as we know it, whether we're talking about football or PTA, parent-teacher associations, or, even alumni, people who really connect with the fact that they grew up and went to a certain high school. It's a touchstone for the rest of their life. It's something we ought to celebrate, and we're not doing right by it. And all you need to do is don't be, confused by the $8 billion number. Look at what the population is of our state going to public schools and how much money is being delegated per student. It's still well below half the national average. Why does Massachusetts and Connecticut have it right and we don't? Is it because we're so big? Well, there ought to be equities of scale. So I'm not saying that everyone is, just magically, proper in how they're efficiently managing their local budgets. But let's be real about what it costs to educate people in a modern Texas.
But I just want to be super clear. Are you not, say you're elected Attorney General, are you not going to enforce the school voucher law?
The school voucher law needs to be eradicated immediately, and I will find a way to do it if I'm not serving with a Democratic legislature. It passed, I understand, but let's be clear about how it passed. Greg Abbott got millions of dollars of donations from people that had a direct interest in this plan being passed, and he used that money to essentially defame his Republican colleagues on the question of border security, which is the one thing they've been like undyingly loyal about. How ironic. And he got them all thrown out because, again, voter suppression is a whole nother aspect of how the Republicans have stayed into power for so long. My point to you is this. Public education is something for everybody, and vouchers take away from that, and it becomes much more of an exclusive club, and it's just the wrong direction. We're going the wrong way down the freeway. We need to go the right way, and let's all put our shoulder to the wheel so that public education is sound again.
If you are elected as the state's next Attorney General, how cooperative do you see your office being with the Trump administration?
Well, I have no reason to believe Trump's going to change overnight, so it's going to be hostile. I'll just be honest with you. If there's, the blind squirrel gets a nut from time to time, I'll celebrate it along with you and everybody else. But right now, he is caterwauling out of control, and it's nothing representing government as I know it growing up. And as a 64-year-old mature adult, what must our children think about us? And so if Donald Trump were to be impeached and leave office, that would be fine with me. If he wants to clean his act up, which I don't think he's capable of doing, that would be fine with me. But I'm not mincing words. It'll be a hostile relationship.
Do you see yourself suing the administration? And if so, is there anything in particular you would file lawsuits on?
Well, I mean, I would if I have to, and, I would imagine I would, but my
Do you
desire is
know
to
what
serve
particularly you would sue for?
Well, let's just say that ICE were to come into Houston or San Antonio and start doing what they're doing in Minneapolis. I would file a 10th Amendment claim against the United States and the Department of Homeland Security, just like Minnesota did. It's an appropriate lawsuit. It's absolutely on the nose constitutionally. You can't bring someone in under the guise of immigration control and let them literally police your streets and beating people and knocking them to the ground and handcuffing them. That is absolutely not what ICE is supposed to be doing. This is a post 9/11 creation, ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. It might be time for a close inspection after the 26th election as to the purpose of these things on us. Like, why are these people policing Americans? It's wrong. And so that's one thing. The other thing that I would do is block any effort that Trump has recently been braying on about nationalizing our elections. I mean, you talk about un-American. I think even Greg Abbott agrees with this. The states, the 50 states, are in charge of administering their own elections with some, federal oversight on civil rights and the matters like that. But any effort to try and nationalize us, we are not the Soviet Union. We are the United States of America.
I want to go off of one thing you said there about ICE. Would you allow ICE to be in Texas at all? If elected?
Well, let me say this. I'm not the emperor. I'm running for attorney general. And so one big difference between me and Ken Paxton is I will give local decision makers authority their proper due. And so, that's a question for mayors and county judges, as the case may be. We're a very wide and diverse state. But, if we see, as I said, Michael, an episode like what we've seen in the Twin Cities up in Minnesota, where, it's just an invasion horde and they're just beating people and shooting them and taking them down, I'll do everything I can and work with every leader of conscience to make sure that doesn't happen in good old beautiful Texas.
As Attorney General, you would be leading an office of hundreds of employees. Why do you believe you have the experience to lead an agency of that size?
In fact, it's 4,200 plus employees. I'd say 800 plus of which are typically attorneys. And that's a great question. Very few people have that kind of experience. I guarantee you Ken Paxton didn't before he started in his first day. But here's what I bring to the table. As mayor of Galveston, after that hurricane, I was responsible to housing and urban development for nearly $1 billion worth of community development block grant disaster relief funds. That's a mouthful. And we had hundreds and hundreds of employees who were on our budget every year that we would pass. And I was on city council and mayor for a total of 8 years. So I had the pleasure of reviewing 8 annual budgets on a very large, consequential Texas city. The other thing is, in my private law practice, which I do every day, Michael, still a full-time lawyer while campaigning, I'm responsible for mediating a large national and international docket of federal workers' compensation as it applies to military contractors, many of whom are veterans. And there are tens of thousands of claims, and I am one of the select mediators that have the privilege of helping these men and women in their darkest hour settle their claims. This is a docket that is so vast, there are just not enough judges to hear them promptly, and so the mediators are often called in to help settle a case before letting things go off. And so you see the inefficiencies and efficiencies in a large mass docket like that. And I think that helps me deal with the human resources matter of 4,000 plus employees.
Couple other questions here. Reducing crime. Do you see the Attorney General's office as having a role in reducing crime across Texas? And if elected, how will you go about reducing crime if you agree?
Yeah, to an extent. People like to run on, I'm the top cop, and there famously are always some ads that have the, sinister, dark voiceover where it shows some criminal episode happening. The attorney general will keep you safe. And to an extent, there are powers that the Texas attorney general have to fight human trafficking, which with the Epstein file, becoming much more prominent in our newsfeed and the horrors that we're seeing in these things, I think we all can relate to how horrible and un-American this is, that people are getting away with this. So whether they're, foreign actors coming into America to try and sell humans and control them, or whether they are Americans doing it to our daughters and young women, there is a place for the Texas Attorney General to combat human trafficking. And honestly, you could spend your whole 4 years focused on that alone. Also, international, quasi-international issues like dealing with the Mexican cartel, the Texas Attorney General can use some of his generous budget to hire seasoned prosecutors and loan them to the United States Attorney's Office. And this might be a way, actually, to cooperate with the Trump administration writ large. It's called Special Assistant U.S. Attorneys. And I think the last person to use that was John Cornyn when he was Attorney General for 2 years. Anyway, this allows you to pay and then direct the U.S. Attorney. I want my lawyers that I'm paying for to focus on drug crimes and human trafficking crimes. And then the rest of it, Michael, I think really ought to be a healthy respect for local prosecutors. I will be delighted to refer notorious offenders that come to our attention to the appropriate prosecutorial authorities. And if they ask for our help, we'll be there for them. So I think that's a pretty good overview of what the criminal aspect of an attorney general's job is.
Early voting starts on February 17th and the primary is March 3rd. Is there anything I didn't ask you would like to tell our audience?
Well, exercise your right to vote. It is the great American franchise. We don't go to our weapons to settle our political differences. We go to the polls. And part of that is protecting your Second Amendment right, and your First Amendment right, and all the other amendments, which are becoming much more in the conversation, like the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment right to free speech, the Fourth Amendment right to have your home secure from unreasonable searches, your Fifth Amendment right to due process, your Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial, on and on. Go vote. Early voting is the best time to do it. Don't wait till the last day, unless you like voting on election day. It's kind of exciting, but make it your point to vote and bring another person with you.
Democratic candidate for Texas Attorney General and former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski. Sir, we appreciate you coming on the show today.
Michael, thanks for the invitation. Great seeing you.